Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Two games in the same franchise, but two very different ones. Does Assassin's Creed Valhalla build upon the quote-unquote new Assassin's Creed experience that was honed by Odyssey, or is it something completely different altogether? Well, joining me to help answer that question, we've got Jordan Ramée.
Hey, Assassin's Creed, just nerd over here who's played pretty much all the games several times and reviewed Valhalla.
I call myself an Assassin's Creed fan, but I defer to you in every regard. I don't think there's anyone better on staff who can add to this debate. It's not even really a debate, it's just a look at the key differences between the two games. So let's get started. Let's start by talking about gameplay. So when I said the quote-unquote new Assassin's Creed experience, I am of course referring to the fact that the origins, pun not intended, of this franchise were very much rooted in action, adventure, social stealth, parkour. And then with Assassin's Creed Origins, it kind of had this pivot and the franchise became this big RPG, and you know, all these elements were inserted in Origins and then, like I said earlier, honed in Odyssey. Jordan, how does Valhalla tackle the RPG-ness of Assassin's Creed?
It's strange because on one hand, Valhalla leans a little bit more into the whole RPG style by like just giving you this huge, ginormous skill tree to just invest.
I am scared of that thing.
It's probably too big, but it's huge, and then they, at the same time, they kind of bring the game a little bit back to the roots of the franchise by bringing back social stealth. Like, there's actually moments in the game where it's like, oh, you have to put on the hood, you have to blend into crowds, you have to use the hidden blade, which hasn't been seen in a while, like it wasn't in Odyssey. So it's simultaneously a little bit more RPG, and at the same time, like, taking a small step back to the roots of the series.
No, I was gonna say it feels more reined in, I think, when you
Yes.
think about the RPG elements to the game. I think in one place where that is very key is in loot.
Odyssey just had so much loot. Like, it just gets to the point where like 20 hours into that game, you're just finding like 4 new bows in like an outpost, and you're just marking them all as trash to just sell. Whereas Valhalla, it's like after its 60 to 70 hour campaign, I'm like, oh, I have, I don't know, 5 axes, 3 hammers, like 4 shields. Like, not a huge amount of loot. It's more kind of based on like finding whatever you really like and then going back to the blacksmith to just keep upgrading it over and over and over again.
One of the things I was going to talk to you about is when we said like things are honed in a little bit is the quest structure. Being a huge open world RPG, there are many side quests. How do you think the balance is compared to the side quests and side activities and world events on offer in Odyssey compared to how they are in Valhalla?
Valhalla, in my opinion, does this way better. Odyssey kind of just like throws quests at you like just in abundance, to the point where like eventually your quest tracker is just filled with like 20 things that you're trying to keep track of. And Valhalla is more like, look, your main gist of this story is trying to make alliances with as many people as you possibly can. You're only gonna really track the alliance that you're focusing on at a time, which might have 2 or 3 different objectives, but no more than that. And then all the like random side quest things that you run into, they're kind of something that you can just wrap up in 4 to 5 minutes, and we're not going to even really track them for you. Just kind of run into them, talk to someone, do something, go back, and that's it. And it leaves the quest like tracker much easier to navigate.
I always consider the kind of unnamed main character of Assassin's Creed beyond the assassin which you play as is definitely the world, the time period in which you are playing around in. You know, history is your playground after all. And 2 very different flavors in Valhalla and Odyssey.
I must say, I think this kind of almost goes back to the last time we had one of these videos when you and Mike were talking about Odyssey, and Origins, and you were talking about how Origins really leans into its setting and tells a story that could really only be told in its setting, and Odyssey not really as much. Like, it's a really good story, the story about this mercenary trying to reconnect with their family, but it's not something really that's defined by the war going on between the two powerhouses in Greece at that time. I feel like Valhalla does a much better job of leaning into the fact that, like, this is an England where Vikings are just coming in from, like, Norway in mass, and they're invading the country, and there's this mix of cultures of Christianity and the pagan faiths. And so you find all these towns that are a mixture of cultures and a mixtures of people, and that's like really cool, and it leans into the story that there's all these rulers, all this political turmoil, and Eivor has to kind of just navigate this literal, like, political shit show, for lack of a better word, to find some place to safely have the Raven clans. Like, look, we just want this one tiny spot of land. Can y'all just give it to us? And everyone's like,
can you just
no.
chill? It feels like way more defined in terms of a world, in terms of a setting, than in Odyssey, where, like, I played as Cassandra, and, you know, she's not a fish out of water. She's very familiar.
It's too hot and too long a walk to go on foot. But think of it as interest, Marcos. Everybody benefits.
She gets obviously embroiled in some higher level stuff, let's put it that way. But, you know, it's, you know, there's none of this, like, unfamiliarity there. And the world, and I don't want to say samey, but, you know, in Odyssey, it's just like many, many small Greek islands. Whereas in Norway, you know, there's snow. There's different gameplay mechanics to being in Norway. It's, you know, you can't go swimming without freezing, for example, and, like, trudging through the snow. And then you get to England. For me, as an English person, is like, you kind of wander up on NPCs and they go, "Oi, what's all this then?"
Oh, me apple cart hath fallen. These apples must be eaten. They're too juicy to be left to rot.
I would say, I think, like, a good comparison is the fact that, like, in Odyssey, you have the Athens and Sparta, like, going up against each other, but you see very little of those two forces, like, really interacting with each other, and Cassandra can just kind of hop back and forth between them with very little in the way of alliance, whereas there are scenes, like, in Valhalla where Eivor or, like, one of her companions are talking to someone who's, like, a Saxon or a Christian or something like that, and they're just talking about how their two languages are so very different, but at the same time very much the same. And it's like, I've missed this aspect of Assassin's Creed, the showing how cultures just over time just layer on each other, and that's really all history is just a bunch of cultures just colliding with each other over and over and over again.
We've mentioned Eivor, we've mentioned Cassandra, Alexios. There's obviously very different ways that the two games, Valhalla and Odyssey, kind of approach which assassin you're gonna play as.
I'll say both of them have started I don't know if it's a precedence yet, like, it's happened twice now, so we'll see if it keeps happening, of you getting the choice of playing as either a male or a female protagonist throughout the campaign. Odyssey was like, you're just locked into either Cassandra or Alexios, and there's a story reason behind that, so it kind of makes sense.
In terms of the actual characters themselves, you know, Alexios gets a lot of flack. I never played as him because I liked Cassandra. I liked the strong.
He's the worst option, Lucy. He's the worst of the two options.
I liked Cassandra because I think she's such a strong character, and I think Eivor is definitely. We talked about Eivor being like this fish out of water, but I love her. I think she's great.
I really like Eivor too, and I wonder if they benefit from the fact that since it's the same character and you're just kind of switching back
like
and
a Commander
forth.
Shepard.
Yeah, essentially it's like, oh, we're just kind of focused on making just a character that unfortunately can't really have any storylines that really impact their gender in any way, but we can just really focus on writing them as a really good character because they're the same person.
Eivor!
I know you now, Sulky the Snake. And these are things from my old home. How much silver did Chadva pay you to betray us?
So I love the way that Eivor, despite being in a new country, has this link to their past. The brother Sigurd is there too, as well as other people who have come over from Norway to build your settlement. And in terms of like the world itself, yes, I love going out and doing the big quests and forming these alliances, but I also love having a settlement, this home base, this Normandy-esque, if we're going to continue to use the Mass Effect comparison. I love having this like home base to come back to upgrade, to have recognizable faces and characters around that I can talk to and like romance.
I was saying the fact that it's still kind of shallow, some of the romances that you can do. It's not like Witcher 3 or Mass Effect or Dragon Age level of romantic options, but I do like that there's a little bit more effort implemented into them this time. I will say for the characters, I think the one thing that Odyssey might have over Valhalla is the fact that since Odyssey is just this really, really long 40 to 50 hour campaign as opposed to 60 to 70 hours of multiple 2 to 3 hour storylines, is that you meet characters as Cassandra that you then continuously keep meeting over and over and over again over that time, and you get to see them evolve and grow and transform into different ways. In Valhalla, it's mostly you interact with people for like 3 to 4 hours, and they're kind of just gone from the campaign after that. Some of them do come back in other arcs, but there are just like a few characters that I'm like, oh, I really like them. I hope I get to meet them again. It's like, no, you just never see them again for the rest of the campaign.
Excuse me, I have a slight pain. Do you notice anything on my head?
So those are the biggest differences between Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla. Jordan, I'm going to put you on the spot. Which would you recommend?
This is really hard, mostly because Cassandra for me is like the new Ezio. She is the protagonist in Assassin's Creed to beat, and I'm not sure that Eivor does that. But just between the two games, I think I like Valhalla a little bit more. I like its world building. I like the way that it uses its setting to tell a very unique story and history that you probably wouldn't find in other video games. So I love Cassandra so much, and that she... but I think I have to go with Valhalla.
So I put a lot of time into Odyssey, and I was completely overwhelmed by it, and I have ended up dropping off at the end. About 50 or so hours in, I ended up dropping off. Whereas I like how self-contained a lot of the arcs of Valhalla are. Like, personally speaking, it's cool to see these places like Leicestershire, obviously we call it like Leicestershire, or like Norwich. I've been to Norwich, you know, it's nice to be able to have that connection with an Assassin's Creed game. And I'm not just saying, you know, oh, it's a bad game because I'm English. But most of all, I just think running in, like doing raids as a Viking and just, you know, chopping everyone up with my axe and throwing things and setting stuff on fire, and I'm really enjoying that. And so I definitely would have to say I prefer Valhalla.
Hear it from from Lucy. It's like, I love England, I love it so much, and I love to burn it down to the ground.
we streamed it the other day, and unfortunately I think I said stomp on the nun. Oh, stomp on it, stomp on her head, stomp on her head.
Should have stomped.
There's our thoughts on Assassin's Creed Valhalla versus Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Jordan, thank you so much. Pimp your review, sir, because it's very good.
I would say, please read it. I put a lot of work and effort into it. It's a very long game to play in a week.
Thank you so much for watching. Let us know what you decide in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.